Communications 110. My name is Tim Counts. This is speech number 3. These are the note cards I'll be using today. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing pandemic, I will not have an audience for today's speech. When you're walking down the street and you see change on the ground, do you stop to pick it up? If it's pennies, I'm guessing the answer is no, based on how many I see on gas station counters, stuffed in between couch cushions, and people just chucking them into fountains in the middle of a shopping mall. Pennies aren't much more than a nuisance in the 21st century, for no other reason than most transactions are cashless these days, with debit cards, credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, other electronic and card-based forms of payment. Well, we're going to talk about pennies today and why manufacturing them any longer in the United States just doesn't make any sense. They're expensive to produce, the process is toxic for the environment, and there's not really a good reason why we should still have them. Let's talk about cost. According to Gore and Weller in 2019, the United States spent $154 million manufacturing $75 million worth of pennies. That's double the cost of what we actually end up as a product, which just doesn't make any sense. Sanborn in 2013 informed us that that's been the case since 2006. For the last decade and a half, we've spent more money making pennies than the pennies were actually worth themselves. Recently, doubling that cost with no end in sight as to how high that number is going to get. Sanborn also in 2013 informed us that the penny in 1913 had 25 times as much buying power as it did in 2013. Over the course of a century, the penny has deteriorated in value that far based on inflation. In the early 20th century, you could walk into a shop with a handful of pennies and come out with something. Today, that's no longer the case. So not only is it more expensive to manufacture pennies than they're actually worth, that process is also extremely toxic to the environment. Waples in 2007 informed us that pennies are made up primarily of zinc. Over 98% actually of the contents of a penny is zinc. The mining practices can be detrimental to the environment. A study was conducted in Nigeria in 2017, according to Igwe, that showed that lead and zinc mining had contaminating effects on local streams and farmlands, which are obviously going to work their way into the local population as well. Alert in 2013 let us know, where my family's from in southeast Missouri, that the aquatic life was suffering as a result of the local lead and zinc mining that was taking place in that area. So the zinc that makes up 98% of the penny, the mining practices associated with that are having detrimental effects to the environment around the world, anywhere that that's taking place. So they're expensive to manufacture. That process is contaminating the environment and having negative effects on plant and wildlife. So why do we continue to manufacture them? Well, primarily, people like them. People like pennies, people always have, and for the most part, people are adverse to change, as we know. One of the big issues, again, according to Waples back in 2007, is that people are afraid of prices going up if pennies go away. This is what they call a rounding tax. This fear, however, has shown unfounded in countries around the world where the penny has ceased to be manufactured in their economic systems. In 2012, Canada, our northern neighbors, they stopped producing the penny up there, and they've seen no negative effects to the economy as a result. Matter of fact, one study shown, according to Chuang in 2018, that when looking at grocery sales, the lack of the penny being manufactured had what equated to about 10 cents of an effect on each consumer over the course of a year. So that means the average Canadian, now that pennies are no longer manufactured, paid about 10 cents more for their groceries after the penny stopped being manufactured as opposed to before. Just 10 cents, which is essentially negligible. According to Lambra in 2007, one of the other contributing things to consider in the United States is sales tax that are applied after a product is priced and put on a shelf, sales tax are applied after the fact at the register. So the price of the product itself won't change. There's no need for the prices to change themselves. It's only after the sales tax is applied. So if the product doesn't change and the sales tax is applied, that number just gets rounded to the next nearest 5. So sometimes it'll go up, sometimes it'll go down. It really, at the end of the day, should basically wash out. One of the last arguments that gets made is in terms of charities. 2 big name charities that come to the front of my mind are the Ronald McDonald House and the Salvation Army. These are obviously rely heavily on change for a lot of their funding. You know, at the window at McDonald's drive-thrus and folks standing outside of businesses ringing the bell at Christmas time for the Salvation Army. It's important to note here that just because we stop manufacturing the penny doesn't mean the ones in circulation lose their value. There are still lots of pennies out there that are still legal currency. They can still be used, they can still be spent. When you go to the store, 5 pennies still make up a nickel. You can still use those. So charities will still continue to be able to get their funding through change. But also, I would argue, as time goes on and the pennies do become less prevalent and less economically needed, people may be more likely to just give them to charity if they don't see a need to use them in their economic purchases. So possibly charities could benefit from this as opposed to the other way around. So look, we've talked about how expensive it is to manufacture them, how detrimental it can be to the environment, and that there's not really any good reason to keep them. I know pennies can be lucky, and pennies can be collectible. I'm a coin collector myself, I get it. However, from an economic standpoint, they're completely obsolete. The price of the penny is always going to be 1 cent, but the price of zinc continues to climb and there's no end in sight there. So they're going to just continue to be more and more expensive to manufacture, while their value will not change. This is valuable money that could be spent elsewhere. Again, last year, $154 million. Given the current situation that we're all in, I think we can all agree that that money could be really used elsewhere and probably be more beneficial to the economy. So you don't have to look far online to find videos of somebody paying their fines or paying their taxes in pennies to a local government agency as a joke. I think the real joke is that we keep paying twice as much to manufacture those pennies. And it's time for that to stop. Thank you very much.